Okay, so we're diving into how to make a workspace. Like, actually, good for you. You send us these really detailed guidelines, and we're going to dig through them to give you the most useful stuff so you can make real changes without drowning in paperwork.
Exactly. We want to make sure you're getting the most relevant insights and not getting bogged down in the weeds of it all.
Think of this as like your cheat sheet to a better workday. We're looking at things like temperature, air quality, keeping your office space organized and safe, and even like how to handle waste properly.
It's all connected, and the guidelines really emphasize a holistic approach to making your workspace function better for everyone.
Right. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about understanding why these things matter.
Yeah.
So let's start with something everyone can relate to, dealing with heat. I mean, we all know it's uncomfortable, but the material you sent makes it clear that heat can tank productivity and even cause, like, accidents.
Absolutely. And health issues too. Fatigue, heat stroke, you name it. It can get serious if you're not careful.
So what can you do besides just cranking the AC?
Well, the guidelines stress the importance of a multi-pronged approach. So it's not just about treating the symptom, but addressing the root cause. One of the first things they recommend is blocking the heat at its source.
Kind of like how you'd put on sunscreen before going out in the sun.
Exactly. Think about things like window coverings. Blinds or reflective films can make a huge difference in reducing how much solar heat enters the workspace.
That makes sense. And what about airflow? Like just opening a window?
Yeah, natural ventilation can be really effective, but it's not just about opening any window. You want to be strategic about it. Think about creating cross ventilation, so you have lower openings for cool air to come in and higher openings for hot air to escape.
Ah, so you're using the natural tendency of hot air to rise,
Yeah.
like creating your own little chimney effect.
Exactly. And if you have machinery generating heat, local exhaust systems can be a lifesaver. They're like targeted vacuums that suck the heat away right at the source.
I like that, a heat vacuum. Much better than just letting it build up and bake everyone. Now, the guidelines also mentioned using barriers and insulation.
Right. Those are key for creating that thermal separation between people and the heat source. Think about screens or insulated walls acting as shields.
So basically putting a buffer zone between you and the heat.
Precisely. But even with all these measures, sometimes you just can't avoid exposure to extreme heat. So the guidelines emphasize minimizing that exposure time as much as possible. And providing protective clothing, like heat-resistant gear, can really make a difference. Even something as simple as having cold drinking water readily available can help a lot.
Yeah, staying hydrated is huge. It's easy to forget when you're focused on work.
Absolutely. And it's also important to remember that heat can affect more than just the people working. It can impact the quality with products being made or stored, so that's something else to keep an eye on.
Good point. Now let's flip the script and talk about cold workspaces. It's more than just being uncomfortable, right? Like, I know if my hands are cold, I can barely type.
Oh, absolutely. Cold can impact your dexterity, your concentration, your reaction time, all sorts of things. And it can lead to more serious problems too, like frostbite.
Yikes. Yeah, no thanks. So what do the guidelines say about dealing with cold?
Well, first of all, layering clothing is essential, and having a windproof outer layer to trap heat is especially important.
Makes sense. What about the workspace itself?
Insulating the building is a must-have, and you want to minimize drafts as much as possible. That can make a huge difference in how warm the space feels.
And what about those little things like having to take your gloves off to use certain tools?
The guidelines actually suggest thinking about whether you can redesign machinery or tools to be more glove-friendly, things like larger knobs or insulated handles.
That's a really smart approach, thinking about how the environment interacts with the work being done.
Exactly. And having designated rest areas that are heated can help people warm up periodically. It's also really important to watch out for each other. If someone seems unusually clumsy or confused, it could be a sign they're getting too cold.
Good reminder. We often focus so much on our own tasks, we forget to look out for our colleagues. Okay, switching gears a bit. This idea of isolating heat and cold sources seems super effective.
It is. It's about containing the problem at its origin. So if you have hot pipes or cold storage units, insulating them properly not only makes the surrounding area more comfortable, but it saves energy too.
Right. Less energy wasted means lower costs, and it's better for the environment.
Exactly. It's a win-win-win. You get better comfort, you save money, and you might even improve the quality of products because the temperature is more stable. There are all kinds of materials you can use for insulation too. Foam, polyester. You just want to avoid anything containing asbestos.
Definitely avoid asbestos. Good call. And what about those heat shields you mentioned earlier?
Those can be super effective, especially for deflecting radiant heat. It doesn't even have to be anything fancy. Even a reflective screen can make a big difference. Water curtains are another option, or you could even build covered partitions to block the heat.
Okay. Let's move on to clean air. The guidelines really stress the importance of having good ventilation and exhaust systems, especially for dealing with dust and fumes.
Absolutely. Those kinds of pollutants can seriously impact your health. They can cause respiratory problems, headaches, fatigue, all sorts of issues.
So what are the key things to keep in mind when it comes to ventilation?
Well, for one thing, you want to make sure you have a good local exhaust system. These are designed to capture pollutants right at the source so they don't have a chance to spread.
Like if you're working with a saw that kicks up a lot of sawdust.
Exactly. Having a properly designed hood positioned correctly above the saw will suck up most of the sawdust before it can get into the air you breathe.
Makes sense. And are there situations where a local exhaust system isn't enough?
Oh, definitely. If you're dealing with something really hazardous, like certain chemicals or fumes, you might need a completely enclosed system that basically seals off the source of the pollution so nothing can escape.
So it's all about choosing the right level of protection based on the risk. What are some other ways to improve ventilation?
Don't underestimate the power of natural ventilation. Just increasing airflow through windows and doors can do a lot. Even rearranging equipment to improve circulation can help.
Yeah, sometimes it's about those small tweaks that make a big difference. Any tips for maximizing natural ventilation?
High-level openings, like windows near the ceiling, can be really effective for letting hot air escape. And combining those with ceiling fans can create a nice upward draft that pulls the stale air out.
And what about in those hot climates where opening windows just lets in more heat?
Yeah, that's where you have to be more strategic. You might need to rely more on mechanical ventilation in those cases.
Which brings us to air conditioning. It's not just about keeping cool, right?
Right. A good AC system also controls humidity and filters out pollutants. That can have a big impact on overall air quality.
Yeah, no, I've definitely felt that difference. Being in a well-air-conditioned space just feels cleaner.
And it can improve productivity too, and even reduce things like accidents and musculoskeletal issues.
So it's not just a luxury. It's an investment in a healthier, safer workspace. Any tips for getting the most out of your AC?
The key is to adjust it for comfort without creating those icy drafts that can make people shiver. And regular maintenance is essential to make sure it's working efficiently.
Makes sense. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about keeping things organized and safe. A cluttered office can be a safety hazard, right?
Oh, absolutely. Trip hazards are a big one. Cables snaking across the floor, boxes piled up in walkways, those kinds of things. And if a fire breaks out, clutter can make it much harder to evacuate safely.
So what can you do to prevent clutter from becoming a problem?
Having adequate storage is key. Make sure there's a designated place for everything, and encourage people to put things away when they're done with them. And think about cable management from the outset. There are all sorts of solutions for keeping cables organized and out of the way.
And what about fire safety? The guidelines mention the importance of having fire extinguishers.
Absolutely. But it's not enough to just have them. You have to have the right type for the potential fire risks. Different extinguishers work on different kinds of fires.
Right, like you wouldn't use a water extinguisher in an electrical fire.
Exactly. And everyone needs to know how to use an extinguisher properly. Remember the PASS method. Pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle, and sweep back and forth.
Good reminder. And of course, you need to make sure the extinguishers are charged and accessible and that everyone knows where they are.
Absolutely. Regular checks and fire drills are essential.
Now, the guidelines also talk about waste recycling, which I think shows how a healthy workspace goes beyond just immediate safety.
I agree. It's about sustainability and taking care of the environment, too. The guidelines recommend practical steps, like having clearly labeled bins for different materials, paper, plastic, metal, organic waste, that sort of thing.
So you're making it easy for people to recycle correctly.
Yeah.
And what about things that can be reused?
Setting up systems for reuse and recycling is a great idea. And of course, minimizing waste in the first place is always the best approach. And if you're dealing with hazardous waste, you need to have specific procedures in place for handling it safely.
Makes sense. Okay, finally, let's talk about escape routes. Seems obvious, but it's something that's often overlooked.
It is crucial. You need to be able to get out of the building quickly and safely in an emergency. That means keeping escape routes clear of any obstructions. No piles of boxes, no equipment blocking the way.
And how many exits should there be?
At least 2 from every area, ideally, and they need to be clearly marked so everyone knows where they are.
And do you recommend actually practicing evacuation?
Absolutely. Regular checks and even quick walkthroughs can help identify potential problems, and fire drills are essential so everyone knows what to do in an emergency.
All right, so let's sum this all up. We've covered a lot of ground today. Everything from managing temperatures to ensuring clean air and keeping things tidy and safe.
And the key takeaway is this. All these things work together to create a workspace that's not only more productive, but also significantly healthier and safer for everyone.
We've talked about a lot of different strategies, but what would you say is one small, actionable change that stands out to you? Something that someone could implement relatively easily, but that could have a significant positive impact.
That's a good question. I think for me, it would be to really focus on decluttering and organizing workspaces. It's amazing how much of a difference that can make, both in terms of safety and productivity, and it's something that everyone can contribute to.
I like that. It's a small step with big potential. So what does all of this mean in the bigger picture? It really highlights that a well-designed and maintained workspace isn't just a perk. It's a fundamental foundation for a thriving and responsible organization.
Absolutely. It's about creating an environment where people can do their best work without putting their health and safety at risk.
And finally, here's a thought for you to chew on. How might taking a more proactive approach to these seemingly small details actually lead to a more resilient and engaged workforce in the long run? Something to ponder.
I think that's a great point to end on. It's about thinking beyond the immediate benefits and recognizing the long-term impact of creating a truly healthy and supportive work environment.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me. It was a great discussion.